In 1997, German-Austrian filmmaker Michael Haneke released the film Funny Games, an incredibly meta film that seems to unveil fiction itself. Something about this movie is haunting, but what's interesting about this film is how it seems to talk to the viewer, to know its every move and just do the exact opposite of, not just what you expect from the movie, but what you want from movies in general. I think Deltarune's Weird Route is doing the same. This video talks about Deltarune's Weird Route and assumes that you've already played Undertale, Deltarune, and the Weird Route, and that you've seen the warning in the beginning. This is a personal subjective analysis as valid as any other. I don't want to see comments saying, that's not what Toby Fox meant, or you're overanalyzing, because the depth of the author and different interpretations that aren't interlocked with the author's intention is cool, and overanalysis is just a point on anti-intellectualism. I also want to put quote-unquote theory crafting aside in this video in favor of literary analysis because I think knowing more about the Weird Route helps in the development of theories and the predicting of plot lines. Especially today with the amount of, though funny, really trash theories and analysis coming out, some people in the Deltarune community need media literacy. Here's media literacy. Anyways, let's start with a major element of the Weird Route is the separation of our character, the soul, with Kris. This is meant to illustrate that us, the player in reality, are in control of the soul. We are literally the soul. This is important in both the plot and themes of the game. Both the normal and the Weird Route include scenes that emphasize this. Chapter 4 especially has an entire sequence where the track, The Distance Between Two, seems to spell out how Kris and the player are different, independent characters. And that song also tells much more about the story of Deltarune as a whole. Watch your nap. We play the piano like what? Kris plays the piano for 7 minutes beautifully. We are different. However, in the Weird Route especially, the separation is made incredibly clear. Kris kicks the bucket in frustration after you do something horrible to Noelle because they never would have done that themselves, and they did not have the ability to control themselves. There's an interesting relationship with the normal route and the Weird Route. In the normal route, we control Kris, and they seem to be alright, maybe even gain something from our control, better relationships and better physical abilities achieved through peaceful means. Regardless, they still seem to want the soul out after all of that. In the Weird Route, we both control Kris and negatively affect Kris. A lot of people treat the Weird Route like Undertale's genocide route. They kill everything, they get stronger through violent means, and they cause Kris to develop negative relationships with the other characters. Doesn't this remind you of something? A situation where someone gets controlled by something and treated less humanely. That's right, it's Darkeners. Ralse is someone who is controlled not by the player necessarily, but by the prophecy. The prophecy in which his only role, and what he somewhat believes all Darkener roles should be, is to serve as a follower, a less humane subject for the Lightners to rule and control. Darkeners are literally objects that the prophecy seems to objectify. We play and objectify with Kris as a toy, just like how Darkeners such as Ralse are suppressed and objectified by the prophecy. In both scenarios, there's metanarrative horror, and it's so weirdly layered. It's stories within stories. Get ready for this, it's a lot. The Darkeners are ruled over by the Lightners. Both are ruled over by the prophecy, and the prophecy's enactment is ruled over by us, the players, through Kris. Why does the Weird Route seem to hit so much harder than the genocide route? It's because there's that hierarchy with the player being at the top of the food chain. And if you're flexible with this hierarchy a bit, you can even add in Noelle, specifically between Darkeners and Lightners. That's 5 different levels of meta-narrative. In case you don't know, the word meta, not the stupid one but the good one, is defined as of a creative work referring to itself or to the conventions of its genre. So a meta-narrative is an overarching story about smaller stories that explains and legitimizes human knowledge and experience. Deltarune's overarching meta-narrative is about the horrifying cycle of control and power that ends with us, the player that experiences this game. Deltarune hits harder compared to most meta-narrative games where there's 2 layers, the player and the game. The games that do those 2 layers well are fantastic of course, but Deltarune seems to be aware of its own meta aspect in so many ways it's bizarre. Sure, Kris and the soul are Deltarune characters, but who controls the soul? Well, us, the player, who lives in a different reality than Deltarune's reality, yet we still somehow affect it! Okay, getting back to 1997 with Funny Games, yes, that wasn't just a dramatic introduction. You don't need to watch the movie. In fact, a lot of people will probably find the movie boring. I thought it was great filmmaking and I love the meta-narrative aspects, which is why I'm applying them here. But this video, Funny Games Unveiling Fiction, is also really well done at explaining the meta-narrative aspects, so just watch that if you want to. But anyway, the whole plot and point of the movie is that it's a home invasion thriller horror movie where the home invaders aren't just aware that they're in a film, they're aware about film audience and the nature of horror stories. When you watch a horror movie, you probably expect the typical tropes of violence against characters, and even though it's gruesome and some of the characters don't really deserve it, you kinda have fun with it. There's not really a tension, there's no stakes. It's just characters dying that you don't care about, right?
Warum bringt ihr uns nicht gleich um?
Sie dürfen den Unterhaltungswert nicht vergessen. Wir werden schon mit dem Spaß haben.
We control Kris because we are the god of this universe. Toby Fox said there's something more important than reaching the end. I think this is what he meant by that. Not just if we do the weird route or not, but if we recruit or don't recruit Darkeners, if we motivate or don't motivate Ralsei to be himself, etc. There are so many specific choices in Deltarune, and if it's not clear by now, choices that do in fact matter, and they're all decided by us, the player. What I'm saying is we're an artist, and Deltarune's events, what we decide through our choices, is our art exhibition, our gallery. And we get to decide the paintings we exhibit. Is it a harrowing adventure of complex teenage emotions, trauma, and ethereal beings? Or is it something weirder? What Toby Fox is doing here is legitimately brilliant. He's not just showing you control Kris or saying the player is a character in the game that controls them. He's deconstructing all video games. In games, you control something. From games as complex as GTA 5 to something as simple as Pong, you control a character. Yes, my favorite character in all of gaming has got to be 5-pixel rectangle. You are the god of the universe in games. In funny games, the movie, not a funny game, the home invaders aren't just aware they're in a movie. They also know what they need to do. They know what horror movies are like. They know what the audience wants out of the story, and they know that there's a hierarchy in this movie like Deltarune. There's the victims ruled over by the home invaders, and there's all the characters ruled by their god of their universe. In this case, it's the writer of the story, Michael Haneke. The writer of the story could have just chosen these two to leave. Well, in the movie they do, but then they come back and make things even worse for entertainment purposes. Essentially, they're aware of the meta-narrative. Every character besides the victims of this movie are aware of the meta-narrative. The decision for the two home invaders to come back to the house wasn't really chosen by them. It was chosen by the writer. The writer in this story chose the path the characters get to go on. We are similar since we have the ability to decide which path Kris goes on. We control over them and write how Deltarune is told. There's something more important than reaching the end. How we write the story, choosing to collect the eggs or not, choosing to recruit Darkeners or not, choosing to do the weird route or not, is also important. A story doesn't just have a beginning and an end. There's also a whole entire middle, a whole experience, an experience that we, the player / artist / writer, will create that's as important and, according to Toby Fox, more important than reaching the ending. Now, to clarify, I don't think Toby Fox is heavily involved in this meta-narrative as the writer. I think he's trying to make us the writer in place of the story instead. That's the experience, the unique experience that Deltarune is trying to give us. I do think you can find an interpretation that fits him in the meta-narrative, and I do think there's a lot of symbols for creation that Toby Fox, the person in real life, seems to be involved with. You can heavily relate Gerson's dialogue about stories to what Toby Fox seems to have experienced in real life while writing Undertale and Deltarune. But in terms of this video, what Toby Fox is highlighting and emphasizing here is how legitimately crazy it is that we have so much control over characters in all games. He's leveling up from the commentary of Undertale's genocide route, which was a meta deconstruction of the RPG genre, to Deltarune, which is a meta deconstruction of all games. Also, to clear out the people who think the soul is doing all this when it's kinda clear that we, the player, are the soul, it's our substitute, our process. If Deltarune is a story, the soul is our pen, our way of affecting the game's reality without being in the game's reality. Speaking of realities, I want to talk about what the Weird Root says in terms of our reality, its social commentary. Now, before we start, please remember to have a nuanced mind and opinion to all of this, not to be weird, and just be generally respectful of these interpretations or any other interpretation anyone else has. With that being said, I believe that Deltarune's Weird Root is a demonstration of two queer teenagers being unwillingly placed into traditional demeaning roles. Kris becomes the husband, Noelle becomes the wife. These are two non-heteronormative people being placed into heteronormative archetypes and tropes. They are being placed in this bizarre, forced conservative nightmare of an unhappy straight couple, as evidenced by the consistent ring metaphor, the urge for Noelle to get stronger while ultimately still being under Kris's consistent rule and demand, which we see in real life is taken to heart by so many weirdos about how the only purpose for a woman is motherhood. No. Kris and Noelle are being objectified and depersonalized. A non-binary teenager and a lesbian girl become husband and wife, and considering the fact that they were childhood friends, the Weird Root becomes queer horror, like the universe is forcing them to be like this, even though they don't really want to. They don't want this. Now that, I'll acknowledge, is a loaded, heavy take. Let's talk about Kriselle for a bit. To quote a famous Kriselle artist, Kriselle in the Weird Root is not relationship goals. This isn't how it should be. I believe you still honestly can ship Kriselle in the Weird Root. But my best description for it is Two people who want to be together, who are getting together, but not in the way they want or the way it should be. They're both people who may want to be in a relationship, but it's being forced onto them in a toxic way with an obvious power imbalance. And that isn't good in any circumstance. That's Weirdroot Crystal, a toxic relationship that the universe itself, well, not the universe, it's actually us, the player who's writing it, is encouraging. Basically, you can ship Crystal and the Weirdroot if you recognize both its yearning and toxic elements, and don't apply it to reality. You just have to be aware of what is real and what is fake. Like that Geese song. Anyhow, let's be serious and talk about something controversial. The interpretation that the Weirdroot is a metaphor, an allegory, for SA. I have to clarify, it shouldn't be considered something that happened in the game. It's not an event in the Weirdroot. It's a metaphor, it's an allegory. The rose that was eventually removed from this scene is a symbol, not something that happened. Now, if you think Deltarune can't talk about dark topics like this, you have like preteen genociders in Undertale, and Deltarune seems to be a more mature version of Undertale. These games can hint, not obviously discuss, but hint at dark themes in a nuanced way, and they should also be discussed, at least considered, with as much seriousness and nuance. The SA allegory interpretation for the Weirdroot is uncomfortable. It's commentary that women in power imbalance relationships get so demeaned and objectified that something as horrible and traumatizing as this can happen because of ignorant beliefs that are continued to be held by some nasty people. It is frightening to see this root as an allegory for a toxic couple where one individual is manipulated, then controlled, then abused by the other, ultimately ending in this scene where there's an animation of a red flower losing its petals and being deflowered. I also want to point out the dialogue during this scene where Noelle describes herself being unable to move and her mind wanting to do something but everything just being too much that she isn't able to look away, to move, to control herself, to do something. It's completely horrifying and insanely disturbing and is just so different from any other piece of dialogue in the game. This moment is really emphasized. Now, let's take a step back from this interpretation and let's look if this makes sense. Would the Deltarune writing team add this? I don't know. It is a far-fetched, crazy topic for Deltarune to cover, but again, Undertale and Deltarune have covered intricately complex and dark themes before. I don't think literal genocide should be normalized and so calmly accepted in these games. Again, yes, it's been years and we've just seen this over and over again, but when we're analyzing these games thematically, I think we should hold some gravity over what happens in these games, or we risk being ignorant both to the game's themes and things in real life that are currently happening now that are similar. However, looking at the Deltarune update log where this scene was replaced with a crack heart instead, the log writes, strengthened imagery while maintaining a scene's intended meaning. Now the statement is intentionally vague and some may believe it completely debunks this as a potential theme, but I want to mention a statement that is currently ruining people's perceptions of Deltarune, which is, knowing Toby Fox, that statement is just wrong. You don't know Toby Fox, or his writing process, or him as a person. He has read and worked on Homestuck, which I haven't read, but that webcomic seems to contain everything, from both silly and serious stuff. Why can't Toby Fox do the same in his games? That's regarding his previous work, not really his work, just something he's read and helped work on. But Toby Fox's UTDR universe? That's all on him, and we don't know how or what he could write. Now let me write some clarifications. I think it is weird for people to be upset that other people are uncomfortable by this interpretation. If you don't like this interpretation, then that's fine, that's completely fine and valid. Because it is an uncomfortable way to look at it. It's horrifying to think these two teenagers would be placed in this situation, and if you don't want to look at it this way, you don't have to. However, I believe having this interpretation doesn't make you a bad person either. A lot of people seem to think that if you have this interpretation, you endorse it or even enjoy it, which no. And also, it's just another way to interpret things. I believe this opinion was caused both by a lot of people being genuinely weird about it or not talking about it with the seriousness and gravity it deserves and just joking about it for some reason. Yes, those people are weirdos. In fact, this is probably the only video on this topic that talks about it with actual seriousness. And genuinely, it's another way to interface and interact with this game's text. It's subtext specifically, it's not even in the main text of the game. By the evidence I provided, I don't think this is a completely unfounded or even an invalid way to interpret this. The way people describe it like, oh, you're weird for thinking it's SA, it's actually symbolism for a loss of innocence in a violent way, or that it's Noelle's sense of self being shattered. Those two responses are nearly word for word replies, by the way, and I feel like the people who said those responses mean well, but I really don't think it's weird to have this interpretation if you're normal about it. Like how they described it themselves, it's not very hard to connect the dots, especially if you know someone or have experienced something horrible like this. Again, if you don't draw those lines, it's completely okay. If you did draw those lines, that's completely okay too, as long as you're not weird about it and acknowledge that it's a serious topic. It's bizarre to me that a game and fanbase that would seem so keen to being open and accepting are so quick to just shun others for this. It is a serious topic. You shouldn't immediately hate an interpretation. Notice that how I said that can apply to whether or not you do or don't have that interpretation. To sum it all up, don't attack people if they have or don't have this interpretation, as long as everybody is normal about it. Everybody agrees this is a topic to be taken seriously. We can have a stable discussion about this. So I've talked a lot about the weird root and how it's important to Deltarune thematically, to its meta-narrative, and to its social commentary. I'll still be doing a bit more of that here of course, but let's address the potential elephant in the room. Since I'm controlling Kris, and what Kris is doing is both legitimately bad and thematically evil, am I a bad person for doing the weird root? I don't think anyone has deconstructed this on YouTube because they're like, well yeah, it's fiction, you're not a bad person for engaging in it. But then there comes the people who have not played Undertale's genocide route or Deltarune's weird route because of a multitude of reasons. See Andrew Cunningham's video on why Undertale was so great, which is probably my favorite Undertale analysis video of all time. But anyways, which of these groups are valid? Well, it's both, and I'm not taking offense to their approach, they are both legitimately valid for the same reason kind of, you'll see. Let's go back to that 1997 movie, Funny Games. Actually, let's watch the shot for shot, basically duplicate English version of the film that's written and directed by the same guy.
His family's in reality and he's in fiction.
But isn't fiction real?
Why?
Well, you can see it in the movie, right?
Of course.
Well, and it's just as real as reality, because you can see it too, right?
Bullshit.
Why?
Alright, so what does that mean? This is the ending of the movie where these two characters, after brutally killing off their victims, are talking about fiction and the nature of stories. The movie about the nature of stories is talking about the nature of stories in the movie itself. I love really meta movies that are more fun to analyze and talk about than to actually watch. Anyway, this part of the script right here is so Deltarune. We are in reality. The characters are in fiction. But wait, we're real and we're in the game, so isn't the game real too? Well, you are a character in the game, right? Well, since you're real and you're a character in the game you play, it's just as real as reality, right? Nope. You gotta be careful and not fall for the facade of these characters in the movie you're meant to deconstruct. I mean, these two characters are literal murderers. So no, Deltarune isn't real, but instead I think parts of the game, but especially the weird root, connects us to the game like we are a real person. For the people who are too disgusted to even play the weird root, you gotta remember it's fiction. For the people who don't care at all for Kris or Noelle or any of these characters who are not real, you gotta remember, it's fiction. What am I even saying here? Well, let's look at this. Easily the most meta dialogue in the non-weird root is Noelle and Susie talking about an evil root in their game that Noelle intentionally played and Susie accidentally played. This dialogue is brilliant because there's layers to this. First off, the text. Susie and Noelle say how in their game there was an evil root. Noelle played secretly and Susie played accidentally because she didn't know you could be nice, so she killed everything angrily, but she'd probably do the good route now if she played it. That is literally just what they said exactly. That is the text of the game. Next, subtext. Noelle playing the evil route intentionally and secretly from her parents demonstrates how she's both secretly really powerful, representing the theme of Noelle getting stronger in both routes of the game, one where she becomes her own independent self and one where she's not, and it also shows how strict and controlling Noelle's parents were when she was growing up, most likely because of Dessa's disappearance. Meanwhile, Susie's dialogue emphasizes her development, how she was a mean girl with a lot of hate in her heart that she didn't even realize she could be nice to people until someone showed her kindness and she transformed into someone who could do good things and make nice relationships. But she's also in danger of falling back to that evil, which foreshadows her insecurities that she can't do anything right, which is a subtext of her fears of how she can't do anything good, and all of that is emphasized in this dialogue by one word. Maybe. Toby Fox foreshadows all of Susie's arc in chapter 4 with one f***ing word. Okay, now let's move on to the metatext. What does this in-game text say about the game itself? Well, it's a discussion of both Undertale's genocide route and Deltarune's weird route. Neither Noelle nor Susie are bad people for playing the game, because while the way they played happened to be reflections of how they acted in real life and their situation in real life, most people who play the weird route are just engaging in a new art experience that happens to have uncomfortable events and themes. They weren't really bad people for playing the evil route because it was just a game. You are not a bad person for playing the weird route. After all, they're just fictional characters. Wait, these are also fictional characters talking about playing the evil route that hurts characters they consider fictional. Wait, so these people also don't matter. Wait, no, but I like these characters. Wait, does any of the characters matter? Does the game even matter? Stop. No more waiting. Let's go back to that funny game script again.
His family's in reality and he's in fiction.
But isn't fiction real?
Why?
Well, you can see it in the movie, right?
Of course.
Well, and it's just as real as reality, because you can see it too, right?
Bullshit.
Why?
Undertale and Deltarune's weird roots and Michael Haneka's funny games are not saying violence is bad in games or in movies or whatever. To quote this video, fiction cannot be a barrier between you and the events on screen. Fictional images can have the same effect on a viewer as real life ones, but without the limitations of having to take place in reality. Basically, you can be affected and changed by fiction the same way you're affected and changed by real life. When you play Undertale or Deltarune, do you laugh? Do you cry? Do you care about these characters? Well, it's cause they're emotionally well written, like they're real, but they're not. And yet, they matter. What I'm trying to say here is not that fiction is as real as reality, since it isn't, but that fiction can feel as real as reality. Have you ever seen a painting, heard a song, or played a game that shook you to your core, that emotionally affected you so much that you decided to change your life? I'm willing to bet most of you watching here have. If you've reached this far into the video, you've probably been as majorly impacted by Undertale and Deltarune as much as I have, and have met people because of the game, have applied the game's lessons in real life. Maybe you've even made a YouTube channel with a great audience because of the game. What I'm really trying to get across is that if you don't want to play the weird route, well, it's because you have an inherent connection to the game's characters. And if you have like 6 Snowgrave files on your Nintendo Switch Deltarune game, then it's because you like the game. Art experiences are supposed to make you feel things. Deltarune isn't your funny bunny silly billy game with 0 themes, because that just doesn't affect your life at all. And yes, it could be that kind of game for you, and comfort games aren't a bad thing. Sometimes you are living the good life and don't want to watch a f***ing Michael Haneke movie. But what I'm saying is that art experiences that force you to feel emotions that you don't usually feel is good, because if it changes how you feel, it can change how you live. I'm not saying to watch every movie. I'm just saying for some media, you should actually let yourself emotionally connect with it and use it in real life as a motivational tool to prove that life matters. It can also make you aware of various social issues, and in general, it could just be a good story. Just let yourself enjoy a good story. If you play the weird route a lot, you're not a bad person or are less connected to the characters than someone who plays it once or not at all. You just happen to feel and exercise an emotion that you wouldn't really be able to feel in reality. Looking at the quote again, specifically underlining this part, without the limitations of having to take place in reality. Yes, there are bad cases of this, like media that encourages you to be a bad person, and yes, you can twist this into some video games cause violence thing, but that is neither the interest of Deltarune's metatextual stuff, nor what I'm trying to say. It's a very bad misreading if you take that away from this. What I'm trying to say is that art is an experience. Undertale and Deltarune could be another game for some, but for many, it is genuinely as life-changing as life itself. Okay. That was a lot. If I get any comments saying that I'm talking too fast, I'm not talking too fast. You're listening too slow. If that was too artsy for you, please watch CJ the X, and also we're gonna go back to the mostly Deltarune stuff. Deltarune's metatext in the weird route manages to be different from Undertale's own weird route by adding some nuance and using its metatext to both characterize the audience and the character you're playing as instead of a different character like Kara. A lot of this is in Chapter 3's Sword Route, which, while not directly involved in the weird route, is still heavily correlated. It's basically considered to be an in-universe tutorial for the weird route. Let's look at this ERAM text. No, part of you is just enjoying this, isn't it? The same part of you that enjoyed yesterday, knowing that you could say it wasn't really you. So there are a lot of parts to this dialogue, and funnily enough, the most simple stuff to explain is the metatextual elements. If you want to see more about Undertale's genocide route and how it uses metatextual elements to mess with the player, see Andrew Cunningham's video. Hey, that's the second time I've mentioned it. But regarding Deltarune, this is one of the many examples where the game is aware of what the player is thinking, and if you want to analyze it metatextually, then the game is basically telling you, the player, that you are enjoying the weird route, and the way you tell yourself you're not accountable for these actions is that knowing you are controlling a character, in this case Kris. Again, you gotta remember this is the game messing with you. Please remember what I've been talking about for like the past 10 minutes. Now that's the metatextual interpretation of the scene. Let's go to the metaphorical. Let's see what this says, not about us or about Deltarune as a story, but about the characters themselves. Let's see what this says about Kris. ERAM, whatever ERAM is, you can make your own analysis/theories about ERAM, is telling Kris within the context of the weird route that they are removing the responsibility of what happens because they're being controlled. Kris is thinking, I'm not involved, so it's not really me. And ERAM's dialogue on Kris, partly enjoying this, is characterization that we really haven't seen before. Let's take a second to consider this. After what happened in the weird route in this scene, after Kris kicks the shit out of the soul, Kris puts the soul back in. Sure, depending on what theory you believe, you can read this as Kris needing to put the soul back in. I mean, we've really seen them look physically worse without the soul. But you have to consider that Kris decided it was worth letting Noelle possibly suffer through more of the weird route. Of course, I believe Kris doesn't enjoy any of this, but I think ERAM calling out Kris's morality in this situation says a lot about what Kris is and isn't willing to let happen. And let's do this, get the slightest bit theory crafty here. Let's consider Kris, Des, art therapy, and Des's possible violent tendencies. I'm gonna assume you know the Deltarune community's popular theories and assumptions, one of which is that Friend's Tale of Hell was involved in in Dess's disappearance and gave Kris severe trauma, as hinted by the Chapter 4 Egg Art Therapy Room. If we look at Deltarune's email ARG, the response to answering 1225 was, "When you have a bat, everything looks like a ball." I don't know why I said ball like that. Now, I don't think Kris and Des had a rivalry or something, I'm not Jaru, but I do think that this could have hinted that Des may have had violent tendencies and that Kris also could have had violent tendencies. I don't think either of them were enemies because of it, hell they could have shared a bond over it, but something happened to both of them that may have made Kris worse, so much worse that they needed to go to art therapy, and it made Des just disappear. Why was Kris completely disconnected with Noelle for years by the time Deltarune starts? Well, you can never wash it all away. Here's another dialogue from that egg room. Right, this is where we draw pictures and don't kill each other. Now, I don't think Kris killed Des. They could have been partly at fault or whatever, but I think it's clear that whatever was behind the tree that Kris tries to sketch until the canvas becomes a monochrome smear that they paint the tree over, whatever was behind the tree, that was the cause. Something happened and Kris and Des were the victims. And this haunting dialogue is one of the few pieces of evidence we have that connects Kris to Des. Something happened. Something weird. I want to talk about something me and my friends were discussing about the tree, specifically the man behind the tree. As we see in this scene, Kris can't bring themselves to visualize it, to face it, and instead draws the tree to hide what was behind it. Throughout Deltarune, the tree rooms have been a consistent source of mystery. Why are they there like that? I believe thematically, metatextually, whatever, this is the game showing us that Kris can confront what's behind the tree, but we, the player, can. The man behind the tree doesn't just appear in the dark world, the fantasy world, the fictionalized world, but he also exists in the light world, in the real world, in reality. However, he only begins to exist in reality if we make Kris confront them. The man behind the tree both exists and doesn't exist, but yet we still continue to find him. We still go on. I feel like this is Deltarune. To accept the consistent contradictions, the good and the bad. Look at the dark world and how much it means to Kris and Susie, and how much characters like Noelle and Birdly have changed because of it. Look at Ralsei, a Darkner that becomes a major character that feels emotions. Independent emotions. See how even though it's technically a fictionalized world, the real characters are affected by it? See how both Kris and Susie make a connection even though they don't really want to, but they still become friends? You ever make a friend because you both like a piece of media or something? Like anything? Like how Kris and Susie become friends because of their shared enjoyment of the dark world? Deltarune is trying to tell you to go out of your comfort zone, to know what's real and what's fiction, and to accept and emotionally connect with both of them. Sure, slob content exists, trust me, I'd know, but also consume good media that teaches morals and hopes despite struggles and pain. Use fictional media to contextualize your real life and then socialize in real life. Make friends. Be a part of a community, both online and in real life, and accept that while problems will arise in both, the answer to living happily is by seeing it through with other people. Watch BFDI. Let me summarize everything I talked about in this video. Deltarune is a meta-narrative horror and how it is for someone to be controlled. It's also a meta-deconstruction of all video games. There's social commentary done through queer horror. It's also a nuanced exploration of art as experiences and how art affects us. What's your limit on seeing fictional characters suffer? What do you want to see? Do you want to see more? Do you want to break away from the normal route and do something weirder? What do you want? To answer that last question, we want everything, and we're gonna get everything, because we're the player. The power of the story is really up to us. You remember when I compared our control of Kris to a painter? Let me make another comparison to how we interact with Deltarune. We're a filmmaker. We are creating the film where Kris is an actor who cannot leave. They have to play their part. It's up to us, the filmmaker, to decide what kind of film it is. What are the events? What are the relationships? Who lives? Who dies? What's the message? Yes, even the message changes in the weird route, from the normal route's anti-determinism and absurdism to, still both of those things in the weird route, but also a bunch of social commentary. You can literally change the message of the game depending on what route you take. I hope everyone here remembers that Deltarune is a story to be felt, not to be solved. This video was made because there are so many analysis videos that are just 18-minute recaps and 2-minute analysis of the weird route. And I don't think anyone has actually talked about the weird route by itself for this long without just recapping it. I hope I did justice to the weird route with this video, and I really do mean that the weird route is a complex discussion about games. And with that being said, feel free to discuss in the comments, fall for more. If you have different takes, remember each person is different, and the different ways we interface with art is what makes both art as experience and humans themselves ridiculously beautiful. Now we need to find a way to do a cutaway gag for the outro.